Making money in the markets is tough. The brilliant trader and investor Baruch put it well when he said, if you are ready to give up everything else and study the whole history and background of the market and all principal companies whose stock are on the board as carefully as a medical student studies anatomy, if you can do all that, and in addition, you have the cool nerves of a gambler, the sixth sense of a clairvoyant, and the courage of a lion. Good morning, everybody. We had a couple of times that the Zoom closed itself, but we are back. Let's turn on the lights, which we were turning on when the Zoom closed itself. There we go. Hope you're all well. I am looking forward to getting into a little bit more reading of Principles by Dalio. I am enjoying it a lot. And yes, I would love some little hearts and other things on Bigger if you're enjoying it as well. And I'm quite sure that Milan on the Zoom is enjoying it too. We are recording it there, and at the end, I'll share how you can get access to those recordings. Let's get into it because it's Friday, the last day of the week to get lots of really good things done. I have a lot to get done today, very big plans for today. So I will get into the reading and leave you to go and do your work, but I will share how you can get the recordings and how you can get in touch with me and how you can find out about some of the amazing things that we have been talking about recently that are related to what we are reading. So stick around and I will share all of those with you. And so nice to see some of you already popping up on a Bigo. Here we go. Finding a way past my intractable investment problem. Very interesting. So he's got a problem and we're going to find out what solution he came to. Making money in the markets is tough. The brilliant trader and investor Baruch put it well when he said, if you are ready to give up everything else and study the whole history and background of the market and all principal companies whose stock are on the board as carefully as a medical student studies anatomy, if you can do all that, and in addition, you have the cool nerves of a gambler, the sixth sense of a clairvoyant, and the courage of a lion, you have a ghost of a chance. In retrospect, that's actually a very interesting way of describing it. In retrospect, the mistakes that led to my crash seemed embarrassingly obvious. First, everything is always easy in hindsight, though. So it's always, to me, it's very interesting when people say, I can predict the future. I know what's going to happen. Well, first of all, we don't. We spoke about it yesterday in the recording. I talked about the fact that there are so many unknowns and there are so many things that we are uncertain of that it is practically impossible for humans to really predict the future. We might guess correctly, but really we just guess correctly. It's not that we've actually predicted it or that we have figured it out. Experts only do about 1% to 2% better than anybody else, which means that we're all just really guessing. So to say then that it was very, very obvious why something happened, it's obvious in hindsight. It's very easy to see why something happened after you have seen the whole thing happening. But you can't really say, well, I should have seen that before I started, because things can go in other ways. And sometimes, as we were talking about yesterday, if you are expecting a Great Depression, if they've put things in place to prevent it from happening in the future, then you don't know how that is going to create a different circumstance when the same circumstances show up as the first time around. So yeah, it's always very much hindsight when you can say that it's very obvious that you could see where your mistake came from. First, I'd been wildly overconfident and had let my emotions get the better of me. I learned, again, that no matter how much I knew and how hard I worked, I could never be certain enough to proclaim things like what I said on Wall Street Week. There'll be no soft landing. I can say that with absolute certainty because I know how markets work. I'm still shocked and embarrassed by how arrogant I was. And on top of that, the challenge, I think, is that when people want an opinion from you, when you are the expert, when you are the guru, people expect you to play the expert, regardless of if you went on TV and you said, I am not an expert, I just talk about what I know, then people are not going to take you seriously. So you have to pretend to be the expert, even though you know, or you might not know. But if it was me, for example, I would know deep down inside that I cannot predict the future. Things are just too different. Things change. Things are not always the same. So it's impossible to do that. But if you go on TV and say that, people will say, oh, I can't trust that person. They don't know what's going to happen. I need to find somebody that does. And somebody else will stand up and say, I know exactly what's going to happen. And if they get it right, then that person is going to get all of the attention. So in a way, a lot of people are going to be saying that they know what is going to happen, and they are hoping and praying that they're going to get it right so that people will stick to them. And then if they didn't, they'll come up with a reason why it didn't happen. But we live in a society, we live in a world currently where you have to be the expert, you have to be able to predict the future, because otherwise people will not invest in you or take the time to listen to you. It's just one of those sad things. Second, I again saw the value of studying history. What had happened after all was another one of those. I should have realized that debts denominated in one's own currency can be successfully restructured with the government's help, and that when central banks simultaneously provide stimulus, as they did in March 1932 at the low point of the Great Depression, and as they did again in 1982, inflation and deflation can be balanced against each other. As in 1971, I had failed to recognize the lessons of history. Realizing that led me to try to make sense of all movements in all major economies and markets going back 100 years to come up with carefully tested decision-making principles that are timeless and universal. So you can set up principles, you can have your ideas of what might happen, and you can protect yourself by setting certain things in place. We can't predict the future, but we can make educated guesses. And yes, as I said, if you go on TV and say, I'm making an educated guess based on what's happened in the past, and based on as much information as I know about what's already been changed or what is different about this particular situation, because every situation is different, the people involved are different. In the late 1920s, when the market crashed, the people were different, the mentality was different, the government regulations were different. Whereas in 2008, when the market crashed, the circumstances were different, the people were different, the mentality, the culture, the rules around what was allowed and what wasn't allowed was different. And so it was a different circumstance, even though there might have been similarities, but it's always going to be a different circumstance. So you can make educated guesses based on what's happened in the past and with as much knowledge as you potentially can find. But you do need to be able to make an educated guess and run with that and then adjust if necessary. But we can't really predict the future. Don't tell anybody, because everybody wants to follow somebody that can predict the future. Okay. Let's have a look. Third, I was reminded of how difficult it is to time markets. My long-term estimates of equilibrium levels were not reliable enough to bet on. Too many things could happen between the time I placed my bets and the time, if ever, that my estimates were reached. Staring at these failings, I realized that if I was going to move forward without a high likelihood of getting whacked again, I would have to look at myself objectively and change, starting by learning a better way of handling the natural aggressiveness I've always shown in going after what I want. Imagine that in order to have a great life, you have to cross a dangerous jungle. You can stay safe where you are and have an ordinary life, or you can risk crossing the jungle to have a terrific life. How would you approach that choice? Take a moment to think about it, because it is the sort of choice that in one form or another, we all have to make. Even after my crash, I knew that I had to go after terrific life with all its risks. So the question was how to cross the dangerous jungle without getting killed. In retrospect, my crash was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it gave me the humility I needed to balance my aggressiveness. I learned a great fear of being wrong that shifted my mindset from thinking I'm right to asking myself, how do I know I'm right? And I saw clearly that the best way to answer this question is by finding other independent thinkers who are on the same mission as me and who see things differently from me. By engaging them in thoughtful disagreement, I'd be able to understand their reasoning and have them stress test mine. That way, we can all raise our probability of being right. And that is the whole key. So still, even a group of people with groupthink, definitely not going to be able to predict the future. Even without groupthink, not going to be able to predict the future. But if you have more ideas in the pool, then you can have a better educated guess than when your educated guess is just your own educated guess. Yesterday or the day before, we were talking about masterminds and how if I have a problem and I come up with my own ideas, I might be able to come up with 5 ideas. But if I have 5 people that I'm working together with and we all contribute ideas, possibly not at the same time when we're all together, but we all come up with our ideas separately so that we don't have groupthink when they're just following everybody else's ideas and reducing the number of ideas that come up. Let's say everybody has 3 ideas without overlaps, then now we have 15 ideas as opposed to my 5. And one of those ideas that somebody else brought to the table might be better. Or we might be able to combine ideas because an element of their idea and an element of my idea are going to really enable us to come up with an even better solution than one of the ideas just by itself. And this is the principle of masterminding. And this is what we are introducing at the Cashflow Club. And I'll tell you more about that and how you can learn to invest and how you can learn to practice and how you can play the online version, which we've created, which takes it to a whole new level and allows you to actually see more real life scenarios and how to bridge that gap, and the 10-week modules that we are introducing that will allow you to not just play the game, but learn the game and learn how to implement in real life. So very exciting, and I'll tell you more about that. And if you are already aware of the game and know it very well, then you can go immediately to the advanced version where you'll be able to meet like-minded people who are extremely good at investing already, or who have the right mindset and have the basic understanding so that you can mastermind together in order to be able to get better results. Let's continue, and then I'll tell you how you can be a part of that and join when we get to the end, which we'll need to get to soon. We're almost at the end of the chapter. We'll finish this chapter, and then I'll tell you how you can join. Okay, here we go. In other words, I just want to be right. I don't care if the right answer comes from me. So I learned to be radically open-minded to allow others to point out what I might be missing. I saw that the only way I could succeed would be to, 1, seek out the smartest people who disagreed with me so I could try to understand their reasoning. And I would say not only people who disagree, but people who agree and disagree, like a whole variety of people. If you only find people that disagree, you might never take any action at all, because they're always disagreeing with you when you might actually be right. So make sure that you have a diverse group of people that agree and disagree, who are all very, very smart, so that you have the right people around you. Know when not to have an opinion. Develop, test, and systemize timeless and universal principles. Always follow a system. Balance risks in ways that keep the big upside while reducing the downside. Doing these things significantly improve my returns relative to my risks. And the same principle applies in other aspects of life. Most importantly, this experience led me to build Bridgewater as an idea meritocracy, not an autocracy, in which I lead and others follow, and not a democracy in which everyone's vote is equal, but a meritocracy that encourages thoughtful disagreements and explores and weighs people's opinions in proportion to their merits. Bringing these opposing opinions into the open and exploring them taught me a lot about how people think. I came to see that people's greatest weaknesses are the flip sides of their greatest strengths. For example, some people are prone to take on too much risk, while others are too risk averse. Some are too focused on the details, while others are too big picture. Most are too much one way and not another. Typically, by doing what comes natural to us, we fail to account for our weaknesses, which leads us to crash. What happens after we crash is most important. Successful people change in ways that allow them to continue to take advantage of their strengths while compensating for their weaknesses, and unsuccessful people don't. Later in the book, I will describe specific strategies for change. But the important thing to note here is that beneficial change begins when you can acknowledge and even embrace your weaknesses. Over the years that followed, I found that most of the extraordinarily successful people I've met had similar big, painful failures that taught them the lessons that ultimately helped them succeed. Looking back on getting fired from Apple in 1985, Steve Jobs said, "It was awful tasting medicine, but I guess the patient needed it." Sometimes life hits you in the head with a brick. Don't lose faith. I'm convinced that the only thing that kept me going was that I loved what I did. So surround yourself with the right people. Learn from the mistakes. There are still going to be mistakes. You could have all the principles. You could have all the knowledge of all the history. You could have all these different things, and yet you are still going to learn and have failures and have mistakes and different things happen. But you can learn from them and create a better strategy. It's not a foolproof strategy, but it's still going to be a better strategy. And you then follow that strategy step by step. And you might tweak it, but you follow that strategy so that you don't blow everything. I saw that to do exceptionally well, you have to push your limits. And that if you push your limits, you will crash and it will hurt a lot. You will think you have failed, but that won't be true unless you give up. Believe it or not, your pain will fade and you will have many other opportunities ahead of you. Though you might not see them at the time. The most important thing you can do is to gather the lessons these failures provide and gain humility and radical open-mindedness in order to increase your chances of success. Then you press on. Yesterday, I was doing some things with foreign exchange, and I wanted to test a new strategy. So I didn't do it on a real account. I actually went to a practice account, and I tested the strategy. The first strategy I tested worked very well, and I made some money. The second strategy did not work, and I didn't lose any money because it wasn't real money. So I was able to learn the lesson without the pain. And if you can find ways to do that, then that is very good. Remember, though, that if you have a practice account, you don't have the same psychology because it is, you know that it's not real. To a degree, yes, you do, but you don't have the same emotional feelings as when it's real money and you know that you are really losing something. So use the practice account, but know that you're still potentially going to make some mistakes in real life because now your emotions are different. And it's the same as reading the market. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know about the influences that you didn't hear about. So, for example, you could know everything about the history of the Great Depression and the stock market crash and all of that. But you might not know about one thing that you haven't read about that also happened during that time. Something small and insignificant that happened maybe to just a small little company that was never mentioned in any newspaper articles or anything like that. And they might have contributed to what happened. And that might not be the case with this one. And so everything seems the same, but there is something different. Or it could be legislation that is different now, because obviously the laws have changed since 1929. There are things that you are no longer allowed to do or that they can catch you doing that were legal then that might not be legal now, that prevents it from happening in the same way. So always keep those kinds of things in mind. But learn from your mistakes and see what you can do in order to be able to adjust your strategy. My final lesson was perhaps the most important one because it has applied again and again throughout my life. At first, it seemed to me that I faced an all or nothing choice. I could either take a lot of risk in pursuit of high returns, and I could occasionally find myself ruined, or I could lower my risk and settle for lower returns. But I need to have both low risk and high returns. And by setting out on a mission to discover how I could, I learned to go slowly when faced with the choice between two things that you need that are seemingly at odds. That way you can figure out how to have as much of both as possible. There is almost always a good path that you just haven't discovered yet. So look for it until you find it rather than settle for the choice that is then apparent to you. As difficult as this was, I eventually found a way to have my cake and eat it too. I call it the holy grail of investing, and it's the secret behind Bridgewater's success. That is the end of that chapter. Chapter 4 is next, My Road of Trials, 1983 to 1994, the holy grail of investing. I'm assuming that's further down in the book, so we will get to that section. But first, that was a great chapter. Again, very, very good insights and very good lessons for all of us in that one. Now, if you missed the other chapters, and I see a couple of familiar names, Arthas, good to see you again, and I see you just sent another heart through, so really appreciate that. If you have missed any of these sessions, you can find them all on YouTube. If you go to the Passive Cashflow Club, we have all the recordings. We also have Rich Dad Poor Dad that we read, and we also have The Art of Thinking Clearly, and we also have some new videos. Today is actually a video day, so I am on my way to a video shoot for the whole day to answer your questions. So if you'd like to be able to have your questions answered about finance, about investing, about wealth creation, about all of those different things, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, cryptocurrency, you name it, if it's finance related, I am happy to answer those questions for you. So reach out on Instagram. You'll be able to find me there and see what I'm up to, obviously, but you'll also be able to send me a direct message and ask your questions. And if I'm able to put the answer, I will. If not, I will look it up and I'll find out for you. I'll talk to my expert friends to find out what the answer is. And then we'll make a video and put it up on the Passive Cashflow Club for you. And that way, not only you benefit, but everybody benefits, because we were always talking about two things, hedging and masterminding. Those two things are going to save your life every single time. So reach out on Instagram and let me know your questions. Please do so today, because obviously today is video day. So I'm able to do all of them, or a lot of them today. We already have quite a lot of questions that have come through, but I would love to be able to do more, because I think that there is, if I'm doing a whole day of videoing, I should be able to do a lot. So please send those through. If you are interested in cash flow, and if you can see how powerful cash flow is in order for you to be able to practice, just like I did with the practice count on my Forex account yesterday, always learning new things, always looking for things that are going to potentially give me a better return. I told the story of when I had the cafe and I was looking at suppliers and using that strategy to constantly improve my system and my strategy for investing. You can do the same thing. You can do that starting by playing cash flow. And cash flow is the thing that really got the wheels moving. It took a while, but it got the wheels moving for me to be able to achieve my level of success, which has been so amazing. So you can do the same. I would like to pass it on. You can come and join us. Reach out on Instagram, business_team_6_official. You'll be able to find me there. You can send me your questions, and you can let me know that you're interested in cash flow. I'll get my VA, my virtual assistant, to send you the details. It is going to be amazing. We have a game coming up quite soon on the 22nd. So we would love to see you there. So make sure that you get in touch. And I am going to stop the recording and get ready for my video day. I'm looking forward to seeing you again on Monday for another reading at Sydney time, 8 a.m. And I'm going to quickly go through Bigo and see who has sent little hearts and other things and who has commented. And I will go back and answer and do all of that, which I usually do on Bigo. But we're going to stop the recording. Remember to make the switch to unlock your rich. I'll see you all on Monday. Have a great weekend.